friends, it's Mal. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do that below. And if you want to follow me on Instagram for more astrology, tarot content, I'll leave that somewhere on the screen. And I'll tell you, okay, so a realm of astrology that I've been kind of intrigued with and experimenting with for about a year now has been electional astrology. Okay. And to be honest, not sure yet if this type of astrology is particularly great for my mental health. But I still love it. I have like this weird deep love and fascination for electional astrology, but then it's kind of like this love-hate relationship because I'm like, I think you are exacerbating my anxiety. So I'll just put that out there. I don't know if any other electional astrologers deal with this, but I feel like it's a little bit of a challenge with keeping my anxiety at bay with using electional astrology. But if you don't know what electional astrology is, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty details in this video, but I can link below maybe like I think like Chris Brennan or the Astrology Podcast has like a beginner electional astrology podcast that you can listen to. I'm not going to go into explaining the rules or anything along those lines, and I'm mainly targeting this video to maybe people who are like me, like students of electional astrology who are in the phase of experimenting and casting elections and kind of waiting and seeing how these elections end up playing out. And I wanted to share for like for teaching, but also as a student, I also wanted to share an election that I recently did cast for a tarot class that I taught in March 2021. And from my viewpoint, I thought the tarot class went really well, and I feel really good about it. And I can't read all of my students' minds, but I'm pretty sure most of them, I think most of them had a good time. And I thought the election that I picked out for this class was like so good. Like it was one of those elections that I just feel like the stars really aligned. And that's something that I'm finding. Sometimes the elections for a right time to do something actually find you versus you finding them. And I'm going to show the electional chart and kind of explain some of the threads of what actually ended up happening in the class and why it ended up being such a good class and a good election. But I wanted to also point out too that I was trying my hardest, like walking uphill both ways, bare feet in the snow, trying to get this class to start in like January 2021. And ultimately, my guides were like, we're going to put the stop on this. This is the wrong time. And I was really, really resistant because I wanted to get this class rolling around January 2021. However, um, I ended up having it in March, and I think we can really see in retrospect like why the universe kind of moved and had me kind of wait a second, because the March election ended up being a really good time to actually start my class. Not only a good time in the stars, but also just like a good time of how this election aligned with my chart. So, without further ado, let's get into the chart, and I'm going to piece together some of the things that went well and maybe some of the things where this chart kind of not necessarily went wrong, but some of the challenges of this chart. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is the chart for my March tarot class. And we started on March 13th, 2021 at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And the chart of this class actually has a Cancer rising. So that would also mean that this chart is ruled by the moon. Okay. And right off the bat, we can kind of see, in electional astrology, we know the moon is one of the most important things we want to keep an eye on, right? So in this chart, the moon's in Pisces, and we're actually just passing like the exact perfection of the Pisces new moon on March 13th. So I don't know. I just it's funny because one of the reasons I think this election actually went so well for me to start a class is because I am a Cancer rising with a Pisces sun and moon. So it was like although I have a balsamic moon, so my moon is just before the new moon, right? But anyways, in this chart we have the new moon phase. And I think that's one of the reasons why this class ended up feeling so aligned, and I felt really good teaching it. I think it's partially because the election lined up so well with my own chart. And as a student, I think that's somewhere where I've made the mistake in my elections in the past. Like I'll see the chart and I'll be like, oh, this is like a great election, let's do it. But then I forget, like, oh shit, like the ascendant of that chart is conjunct my Mars, or the first house in that chart is actually my 12th house, or whatever. And I think that's something to keep in mind. And this is what that experience of electing this class taught me, the importance of not only having a as good of an election as you can, but also trying your best to align the election with your own chart in a way that makes sense. Okay. So, I mean, like looking at this, there's no mystery why I think the universe put the brakes on me starting this class in January 2021. It was like the universe was like, wait, there's like this perfect time that aligns perfectly with your natal chart in March. Okay. So again, we ended up starting March 13th on the Pisces new moon. And also, one of the obvious reasons why this election went so well, I think, is because I have some really good things going on in the ninth house. And what is the ninth house? Teaching, education, esoteric studies, belief systems. And what was I teaching? I was teaching a tarot class. So, and what is the ninth house in? It's in Pisces. So I feel like there's no better energy in the ninth house for teaching something esoteric than Pisces. Maybe Aquarius would also have been a good ninth house, but I felt like that ninth house in Pisces just went so well with what the tarot class tries to accomplish. So I teach an 8-week tarot class, and we could call it a tarot 101. But I don't necessarily love to call what I do tarot 101, just because the class is actually called tarot for self-discovery. Actually, sometimes I call it tarot for self-discovery, and sometimes I call it tarot for personal transformation. I kind of switch off. But that's the goal of my tarot class. It's not only to share the meanings of the cards with my students, but I really always set the intention that my students walk away knowing a little bit more about themselves, like discovering a piece of their own spirituality, connecting with their guides, connecting with their own sovereignty and autonomy when it comes to reading the cards. Okay. So I don't know. There was something about this Pisces ninth house. I felt like one of my students said that this was the class that helped her actually get tarot in a more intuitive way. And I did feel like this class was really working hard to kind of be more receptive in moving away from the memorization of the tarot cookbook and into a much more intuitive psychic way of downloading the meanings of the cards. Okay. So this was something that I felt like the whole class was kind of on the same page with. Everybody was really excited about practicing their intuition. And I think that's not only indicative of the new moon in Pisces in the ninth house, but also the moon being the ruler of this election. And also here in the election, the sun, I got the sun conjunct the MC, which was just really lucky. And also on this Pisces new moon, if we remember, what is I almost said Mercury. Venus is conjunct Neptune. Okay, so hang on, my computer is dying. Mercury retrograde. God damn it. Okay. But also the Venus Neptune conjunction in this chart, I think actually made a really good environment for learning something esoteric. I mean, I suppose the shadow side of Venus Neptune could kind of be like kind of like an overly idealistic or a sort of an imagination soup where we're just lost in like the soupiness of spirit and God and the universe, and not necessarily being able to tangibly bring anything down because we're so much kind of in the head. I mean, in a way, I feel like this probably would have been also a good election for like like doing some kind of plant medicine psychedelic trip in a way. This would have been a really good chart for that as well. So I felt though the Neptune Venus in the ninth house did actually aid the class in a lot of ways, because again, our goal was to get in touch with our intuition and do a little personal development, self discovery along the way. I will say, I think the downside of having all of this Piscean stuff going on in the ninth house, me as the teacher, I felt like in this class, because I was more relaxed than I usually am when I was teaching. Sometimes when I teach, I get super uh I think I sometimes get a little bit too analytical or get a little too worried about what everybody's doing or what everybody's thinking or if anybody's getting it. I have very much that teacher brain where I'm looking to every student and I'm kind of trying to read their energy and seeing if they're getting it, and I'm trying to manage a lot. And there was something about this class where I felt so much more relaxed as a teacher, but because I was so relaxed, I tend to be, Pisces moon, I tend to be more intuitive. So when I was teaching, I would find myself really clicking into a more channeling kind of state or an intuitive state really, really quickly. So I think I had a little bit of trouble as the teacher really following um, our class materials word for word, because I was off in another plane. I don't know, channeling something. And there was also a couple moments in this class where I would just completely lose track of time as the teacher. And I'm usually not like that, okay? But in this class, for some reason, Pisces in the ninth house, right? Venus and Neptune conjunct, I think. I was losing track of time, and suddenly we'd be 20 minutes over time, and I wouldn't even know. And there was this one class where my student was like, she typed in the chat in Zoom, and she's like, Mal, great class. I got to go. I'll watch the rest of the recording. We're running a little late. And I read that and I was like, what is she talking about? We're not late. And then I like looked at the time and I was like, holy shit, we are 25 minutes over time. And I didn't even notice. That was very much the energy of the class. It was like we were all kind of swimming. At least I was swimming in another realm and losing track of human time and what was happening in earth, on earth, if you will. But overall, very good energy for a tarot class, right? And I think this would have been a great chart for really any esoteric class that anybody was teaching or taking. So I'm trying to think about some of the things that maybe showed up in the class from the chart besides like the stars of the show, which are the moon and the ruler of the ascendant in an electional chart, which happens to be both the moon in this chart because we have a Cancer rising. But I'm kind of looking at this Uranus in the 11th house, which was really interesting. And I guess Uranus and Saturn were in a close square in this chart, which I felt like some of the students in my class were really kind of on the cusp of a sort of breakthrough. I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but each tarot class that I teach, I do a card that is sort of like our mascot of the cohort. So the card of this cohort was the Magician. And I think that the card, our mascot card, really ends up working its way into the class somehow magically because that card ends up being like our guardian angel of the class. Okay. So, our card being the magician being about like how we use our tools and what we have at our disposal and how we harness our own free will and power, you know, in this universe. I think that Saturn Uranus square was actually speaking to some things going on behind the scenes in some of the students' lives. Of course, I'm not going to reveal personal details about my students or whatnot, but just like kind of seeing like how their lives were playing out throughout the 8 weeks, from what they were posting in our class group about their daily polls and what they were sharing with me about their lives. A lot of people seem to be really having a time about really like trying to change something. Like one student really changing the career path, another student changing their the place of living, another student wanting to kind of set boundaries, more boundaries with their family and trying to change some like behavioral patterns. And these changes I think that some of the students were trying to make really felt like trying to get the car out of the mud, you know. And I think they were ultimately started to be really successful. But that's kind of like what it's like. That's kind of like Saturn and Uranus. Like the change is like really hard to make. Like the wheels are really hard to get turning. But once they get turning, the car just gets out of the mud like super fast and it just yanks out, you know. And that kind of feels like some of the students what they may have been experiencing behind the scenes when the class was going while the class was going. um, a really memorable thing that happened on this note, and I don't think the student would mind me sharing it. And I think it does relate to both the Saturn and Uranus square and the Magician card of this class. But on our last day of class, one of my students had to leave class early because she was going to view a new apartment. Okay. And so she said, I'll watch the recording, see you guys later. And we all were like, oh, good luck. Like, you go get that apartment. And she ended up, yeah, signing and she's going to move into the apartment in July. And I thought that was so magical that that happened on the last day of our magician's class. You know, she's manifesting this new apartment, she's manifesting this new energy in her life. And that's very Uranus Saturn in an interesting way, you know. And there were other instances too where other students had similar changes, but that was a very tangible thing that actually happened in the class. So that was really beautiful. um I'm trying to look at like the malefic of the chart, which was Mars in the 12th house. Also, I see the 5th house is answering to Mars. That could be, you know, I didn't really perceive too much going wrong with this class, to be honest. So I think I mitigated Mars pretty well in this chart. I see that technically Venus is making a sign based square, overcoming square, and Jupiter is making a sign based overcoming trine with Mars. So I'm guessing that that probably aided in some kind of mitigation. Mars is not overcoming or squaring anything, is not making an overcoming square in the chart to anything. The one thing I can think of is that one of the students who joined the class actually found out that they were pregnant pretty early on and emailed me and said that they kind of wouldn't be able to come to the live classes because they were feeling sick, and understandably so. And I just kind of see the connection there between the fifth house of children and maybe Mars in the 12th house. I don't know. Maybe that was maybe that was kind of the malefic moment. Not that I see my student being with child as a malefic thing. I mean, I'm of course really happy for them, but yeah, maybe that was the moment. I still don't really exactly know how to piece together that Mars in the 12th. And I think it was ultimately really mitigated pretty well. I'm looking at the other malefic in the chart, which was Saturn, but we do have a day chart. So Saturn's going to be more productive. Saturn was also co-present with Jupiter and Mercury in the 8th house. So some of those maybe more malefic 8th house themes didn't show up so much in this class. In fact, when it comes to money, or the money that I was collecting from this class, I think I only had like one person maybe drop out like halfway, and then their payment just kind of was null and void, like like their second payment never came through because they kind of ghosted. Although maybe that is Saturn in the 8th house, but I think when you teach a class as a teacher, you, especially as like a astrology, tarot, esoteric teacher, that's pretty standard. Like you're gonna kind of do the math for like one person maybe dropping out or whatnot. So maybe that was Mars in the 8th house, but overall I actually felt like everybody was really, the rest of the class was very on time with their payments, and I felt like yeah, I felt like I made can I say this? I feel guilty saying this, but I feel like I actually, and I don't know why do I feel guilty saying this? It's like, ugh, it's that kind of last piece of imposter syndrome, I think. But I felt like I made a good amount of money from this class, and I felt happy with the exchange, right? And I should feel proud of myself for that. So patting myself on the heart, on the shoulder, and we'll kind of start letting go of that guilt or whatnot. Okay. So that was the class. Those were the highlights of the class. I hope this helped someone who is a student of electional astrology maybe understand how an election may be played out for me. Now, if you want to stop watching here, that's totally cool, because the last thing I wanted to show you all is let's see. So this summer, starting June 13th, I have another cohort coming in. And I'm a little bit more iffy about this chart that I elected for the class. However, it was a little bit of a situation where in June, there wasn't any like really prime class starting dates, with Mercury in retrograde and with the Saturn Uranus square approaching, right? So I kind of had to do a thing that we sometimes do in electional astrology, where I was kind of picking the best case out of some charts that weren't exactly the best, right? And this class I'm teaching this summer is sort of like a highly sensitive person summer camp, I'm calling it. So it's not quite as like analytical as like a tarot class. It's a little bit more of like a group talking, therapy, healing, cohort kind of situation for highly sensitive people who are needing support with developing skills that would potentially make their lives better. Okay, so that's the class this summer. I'm really excited about it. But again, there wasn't a great time to start really in June or July. So I kind of just had to like pull this out of my ass, and I was like, all right, we're just going with this. And okay, I know you're judging me. I know, I already feel it. If you're still watching, I feel you're judging me. The chart being ruled by Mercury in retrograde. But let me explain. And maybe 3 months from now, I'm going to come back and I'm going to eat my words. But for now, here's what I'm going with. And we'll do a review of this class once it's over. But I did decide to start with a Virgo rising ruled by Mercury retrograde in the 10th house. However, the premise of Highly Sensitive Person Summer Camp, a lot of what we're doing is talking. A lot of what we're doing is discussing things like boundary setting, traumas of the past that keep us from stepping into our power now, inner child healing. A big part of this class is about nonviolent communication, internal family systems work or parts work. And I felt like intuitively, actually, Mercury retrograde kind of being a really good energy to examine some of those things. Like, what better energy to examine the way we communicate and to examine inner child parts that are kind of repressed and beneath the surface than Mercury retrograde. Okay. So that's kind of what I was thinking. But I also think that there are some good mitigating factors for this chart, okay, for the ruler being Mercury retrograde. One, Mercury's in Gemini and it's domicile. I'm hoping that counts for something. Two, the other thing I'm hoping that counts for something is that Jupiter, the benefic of sect, is forming a overcoming square. Okay, it's a sign-based overcoming square, but it's still an overcoming square. And Saturn is trining Mercury. Okay, I know Mercury's squaring Neptune technically, and the sun's also squaring Neptune. So we're give and take here. Okay, we can't get it's not as perfect as the March class, but something's going on there. I think it's actually speaking though to some of the work that we're actually going to be doing in the class. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Okay, but again, we'll make another video after this class is over. Now, the good thing about this chart, I think, is that the shining moments of this chart are, I think, the 9th house and the 11th house, and also Jupiter. Okay, this is what actually sold me on the chart. While this chart is ruled by Mercury retrograde, we have Venus co-present with the moon in Cancer in the 11th house. I'm hoping that's going to give us a really, really good group dynamic where we can build trust and vulnerability and intimacy with each other. Okay. And also, the 9th house of teaching and classes is in Taurus, ruled by Venus in the 11th. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that Uranus and Venus are sextiling each other from the 9th and the 11th. It makes me feel like that is really speaking to like the weirdo, highly sensitive person, like that, because highly sensitive people are like the coolest, weirdest people ever. And I just love them. And, I'm a highly sensitive person. So I feel like that's kind of speaking to the type of person who would take this class. Something else I'm really excited about is just the fact that I was able to get Jupiter conjunct the descendant. Again, that's the strength that I was trying to build into this class. I want the strength of this class to be our group's connection. I want people to truly feel like they're becoming friends and they're finding connection, and they're finding healing not only in sharing their vulnerabilities with other people, but also hearing other people's stories. Okay. So I'm really, I'm banking a little bit on that Jupiter conjunct the descendant. I hope that helps me out a bit. Okay. The one thing, to be honest, the one thing I'm a little bit nervous about isn't actually Mercury ruling the chart. It's a little bit more about the moon in Cancer. If you made it this far in the video, let me know what you think. But I am seeing that the moon in Cancer is about to leave Cancer soon and run into the conjunction with Mars. So that's actually the part of the chart that I'm a little bit nervous about. But again, I'm hoping that the moon in its domicile in a really good house is enough. Okay. And how does this chart overlap with my chart? Well, I'm kind of hoping that it overlaps fairly well because the moon is conjunct my ascendant. My ascendant is around 26 Cancer. Okay, so the moon is conjunct my ascendant. Venus is in my first house. Yes, this is my 12th house, so that's a little. But also, Jupiter is on my moon in the ninth house. So again, we're not going to win 100% with every election. However, I think there's still some really good things going on in this summer class. And I'm excited to report back to you all. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you learned anything about elections through this video. Let me know if this helped you out. And I would love to see more of these videos floating around YouTube. So if you're an astrologer, I can unofficially tag you to to do an electional review video, because these are videos that I actually love to watch as well. So let me know down below what you think, and I will see you in the next video.